Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to another edition of Just Thinking. Today we're going to talk about the override and the town election. It's a special town election that will be held on September 10th. I have three guests that are going to carry the weight for today's conversation. So I'm going to start at my far left, Jaime Cutone, who is the president of HFT, Holliston Federation of Teachers.
Yes.
Always switch those back and forth. Dr. Susan Kustka, Superintendent of Schools. Susan, thanks so much for being here. I know today was your first day with back to school and everything, so I'm really grateful that you could do this. And Dan, you didn't go back to school today, but at any rate, Dan Alfred, Chairman of the School Committee.
Nice to be here. Thanks, Mary.
All right, let's get this. I'm wondering the exact language of what we're going to see on the ballot when we get there. What does it say?
So I brought it with me.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Because I literally have not even looked it up.
So the question is, shall the town of Holliston be allowed to assess an additional $1,170,366 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of providing for the general administrative costs of operating the Holliston Public Schools, and then it lists the dollar amount, and for non-union salary adjustments to numerous departments, and lists that dollar amount for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024.
Okay.
And those dollar amounts are what was voted on at town meeting.
All right, we should explain. There was a special town meeting June 20th, if I recall correctly, at which everyone agreed that should this pass the election, then the appropriation of the money would go to the schools. So that part's all out of the way because it does take those two votes to make it lawful. All right, so we've got the exact language as it appears, but clearly when somebody walks in, if that's the only thing they know about this whole thing, they're going to say, huh?
Right.
It's, you know, and it's true. I'm glad that it's worded as it is, in that it's operating expenses. You know, if it were this lengthy verbiage, we probably would never get through the town election. So anyway, so what's it going to be used for?
The money will be used to fund the agreement between the Holliston School Committee and the Holliston Federation of Teachers for a new successor contract that begins on September 1st of 2024, if the override passes, and for the next 3 years. So the most significant, by and large, the largest amount goes towards salaries.
Okay, it's salaries. Well, we'll get to that.
Right.
All right. So the largest part of that goes to salaries.
And in addition, there's a $200,000 for additional buses to help correct an issue that has been identified by many parents and has continued to be discussed and lamented on the current start times at the schools. Having fewer schools helps in many ways. It keeps administrative costs down. There are many, many, many benefits. But one of the negatives is that it's hard to get all the buses and all the parents in and out of them. And so there's been difficulty trying to get start times onto a sort of a better schedule and 2 start times across the district. We needed more buses, and that costs money. And the schools have never had that money in the past to fix it. So we're trying to address that here, not just because it's a problem, but also because within the contract that we negotiated, there's an additional 15 minutes of the student day for additional instructional time, 10 minutes at K through 2, and that would just simply push the start times. If you push Miller earlier, you'd have kids being picked up almost at 6 o'clock in the morning, and if you push Pasantino later, you'd have kids getting off, the littlest kids getting off the bus after 4:30 in the afternoon.
For those parents who are not currently with children in the schools, they have no idea what you're talking about with this. And I was stunned this morning when my neighbor said, Eleanor has to be picked up at 6:25. It's like, oh my God, 6:25. That means I've got to be up the day before. You know, that's really horrible. That really is tough. It really is tough. And it's primarily because everything is clustered in one place.
It's really the Placentino Miller campus is our bigger campus where they're attached. We have about 1,300 kids on those 2 campuses. So ideally, we'd love to start both of those schools at the same time. Sometimes you have a 1st grader and a 3rd grader, and now they're on such diverse times that it's challenging for parents. But getting 1,300 kids on the campus and off the campus is the problem, the congestion on Woodland Street.
It's a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
And just to add that in between it has complications for parents because there's 90 minutes between, essentially 90 minutes between when Miller starts, between when Miller starts and when Placentino starts. And so that means when you're dropping your Placentino kid off you almost have to turn right around and just go pick up your Miller child. Or there's, with a 6.5 hour day, that's 3 hours, so there's 3.5 hours between, which just is, for working parents, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Even for stay-at-home parents, just the ability to sort of get things done during the day when you only have 3 hours in between. By the time you drive half an hour somewhere and drive back, you have very limited amount of time.
And really those students at Miller who are getting up really early in the morning in order to make that bus, a lot of parents are choosing to drive their child in just so they can squeeze in another 25, 30 minutes, which is adding to the congestion in town too at that hour.
Yeah, and the bridge is still out. But let's
Which
not
didn't
go
help.
there.
It certainly didn't help anything.
Okay, so anytime that anybody does a contract, obviously there are benefits that inure to one or more parties. So let's start with the administration. Are there any benefits to the administration within the contract?
And I did speak to the town meeting when people asked me. To me, that additional instructional time for kids is really critical, especially after COVID. We've had a lot of students that needed extra support. So the 15 minutes that the teachers normally stay after school will now be going to the students directly, and it's going to be direct instructional time. And I think that's really going to make a huge difference in the lives of our students. They're getting a ton of extra hours every year, and then over multiple years. So to me, that's the most important thing for me, that instructional change will happen. And it means our teachers get to teach more, and they keep telling us, I can't fit it all in. There's a lot of Massachusetts state standards and common standards at the federal level, and it's just too much on their plate. So I really think it's going to help the teachers be able to manage the workday for themselves and get the instructional time in.
Dan, what are the numbers for, it sounds like nothing at 10 minutes and 15 minutes, but when you did the calculations, so.
Right, so it's 15 minutes a day for most outside of K through 2. Over the course of a year, that's 45 hours or 30 hours. But over the course of a K through 12 education, it's 540 hours of increased instructional time. And Massachusetts says that a full year that you need of instructional time is 990 hours. So this is more than it's more than a half a year of increased instructional time. So it is a phenomenal benefit to the students. And I think, I've seen a lot of talk online about people saying there's nothing in this for the students. And like, please give me a break. This is a game changer. If you look at a lot, not every, but a lot of the top performing school districts in the town, in the state, and I'm not going to name them, but everyone can name them, they have school days of about the length that we're going towards. Okay. They're on the longer end of the.
How did that happen?
I don't know the history of it. But
anybody know? No. How did it happen that they? Anyway.
Every district is different in how things happen. It's just over decades of.
It may have always been. I really don't know how long the hours have been the way they are, but.
It's funny. It's one of the things I don't remember coming up in all the reading I did. So anyway, all right. As far as the teachers are concerned, what do you think?
So retaining and attracting talent is incredibly important in education. I can't stress how much it is essential that we retain our teachers here. Having a teacher who's even experienced from another district, it takes a good 3 years when you start to teach in a new district to really feel comfortable to the point where you can start to contribute more and make a difference. It's probably not until about year 7 where you are an expert teacher. You can start to mentor other teachers and bring them on board, and we can make a difference in the lives of children. So the largest benefit I see with this contract is moving our district to a place where we can really attract and retain our valuable educators. And that's going to help everyone. When we are colleagues in the district, and this is something we all care about, we are all united, all the school committee, the superintendent, and the teachers union. We are united in we need to be able to hire the best staff and keep them. And how does it benefit the students of the community? That's key. When we have experienced teachers who aren't frazzled about what they're going to do the next day, and they can really be innovative, try new things, collaborate, and really get to that higher tier of teaching, that's when we see great things happen. So that's what I see as the largest benefit with this contract and with this override.
Can I piggyback off of that?
Sure.
I agree with everything Jamie's saying, and also from the administration perspective, when you think of all the training we do year to year, for example, Jariel Vernay, our Director of SEL and Equity, he's brought in some phenomenal courses, as you know, the trauma courses through Lesley University, and we were able to get those at such a very low cost for the district. So we've had, I forget how many teachers, but at least 24 or more took these courses, and then they're using that work in the class with the students. If they move on, we've now lost all of that training and resource. And this year, we're actually we bought all new math curricular resources for the entire district. Again, we're spending all this money on training, which is duly needed, through All Learners Network, and it's necessary for our teachers to do that. And then the teachers leave, we've spent all that money and invested in them, and we're starting all over again.
That is actually a peril of public service, period. I mean, I know we just went going through that in the assessor's office. You know, it's just hard.
If I could just make one sort of piggyback on what Dr. Kustka just said, just so clear, we did spend a lot of money on new curriculum. That was capital money. It was not part of the operating budget. I just want to be clear because people say, well, you're spending this money. Why couldn't you go to that? And the other thing, it's not separate money because it's all taxpayer dollars at the end of the day.
Right.
But it's money the town has put aside to be spent on capital.
Yeah.
And we haven't purchased those resources in many, many years. We were falling behind on getting new and current resources.
We were called out by the state on some of our curriculum
There were comments
alignments.
from the state on the fact that our curriculum wasn't aligned and we didn't have the resources aligned to the state standards as well.
That's a bad thing, right? I mean, you
It's
don't
not a
want
good
the
thing.
state. You don't want the state getting on your case. I mean, and I think people need to pay attention to that. When you talk about the kinds of additional benefits that you're going to get, there's also the question of what specifically are these benefits? You know, what are the dollars and cents that we're talking about inside this?
You mean as far as within the contract?
Yeah, please.
So what are the terms of the,
Yeah.
So the contract is for a 4% raise in year one, a 3% raise in year two, and a 3% raise in year 3. And to be clear, that's the COLA. So teachers are either earlier in their career and they're on the steps, right? So they get a sort of a raise each year as with their increased experience, and then the COLA is layered on top of that. Teachers at the top step only get the COLA.
Right.
So it's 4%, 3%, 3% for everyone, and then some teachers who are earlier in their career get steps. In addition, in year two, there's a $1,500 sort of additional step that's going to be added on above the top step.
And that's for the longer term.
That's for the
Longer term teachers. Now, I know that there is criticism out there about the 4%. I mean, 4% just somehow looms as somehow, I don't know. I'm not so sure, and I've not calculated to figure out, what would the difference be if it were 3%? Would you feel a whole lot better? And, I'm not going there. But how did you end up on 4%? What was the thinking behind that? What motivated it?
I can speak from the union perspective without getting into the details of bargaining, because
Sure.
one thing that's really important to understand for everybody in the audience is we have our elected officials here, we have our superintendent who plays a role in negotiations, and then we have the democratically elected union representation who comes to the table, and our job is to negotiate a contract in good faith, and that's exactly what we did. We all came together and negotiated this, and when that happens, each side is making concessions. We are coming to the table with our perspectives, our viewpoints. We're also coming to the table with our constraints, and our goal is to get to an agreement that we believe is ratifiable by our constituents. So the union has to take this agreement back to the teachers to have it ratified, and the school committee has to bring that back to the rest of the committee to have that ratified as well. And so what you see here is an agreement that the parties came together in good faith. We never reached impasse. We never needed a mediator. We didn't see all of the things happening in Holliston that we see in other towns that are going on. So we came together in agreement, and we're asking the town to support that agreement that was collectively negotiated in good faith. So with that agreement, and you say that people may have asked some questions about the actual percentage of that COLA, it's important to understand what people may not see in just this agreement. When people take jobs, they look at the whole benefit package. And for years with our previous superintendent, Dr. Jackson, he would tell me, I have people who come to my office and they say, they're ready to sign, but then they find out how much the town pays in health insurance. And that gets really tricky for people when they have to make a decision of moving from one school system to another, and then they find out that in Holliston, the teachers pay 40% of the insurance premium. So that's the part that people may not see when they start to compare salaries from one town to another, is the whole benefit package. We also work a longer school year than some other school districts too. You look at it on a per diem rate. We are working at a longer year. So there are details in there that really do contribute to the overall end amount of money that people are looking at when they come to work here.
And there are differences too. Like, you just can't look at a salary for a certain amount of experience and compare that easily across districts. There's longevity that other towns have that Holliston doesn't necessarily have. Different towns decide come to agreements on paying their people in different ways. So it's very hard to just look across to compare.
Yep.
But if we're just looking at sort of currently, I mean, Wayland last year, I think it was last year, signed a 4.33 contract. Ashland this year signed a 3.33 contract, but increased their longevity significantly. Franklin, I know this is not a great example because they've been having a lot of trouble, but 2 years ago signed a 4.44. Framingham this year just signed a 2.33.5. However, top step teachers get an additional 2% in the second 2 years, so it's really a 2.5.5.5. So when you look over the course of, comparably, we're this is about it, for top step teachers about 12% over the 3 years. And just so people can put that in because things have changed a lot. You used to see 2.5% type of contracts. Well, that was all fine and good. I'm looking at average hourly earnings in the United States, and I have this for Boston and Worcester too. But from 2010 to 2017, it ranged between 1.5 and 2.5 to 3%. In 2020, it was up 5.25%. In 2021, it was up almost 7%. Yeah. In 2022, it was up 5.25%. 2023, 4.7%. So these are what the average, and these are corporate people. These are all jobs, right? These are not private sector, public sector jobs, but it's all jobs. So the reality is that wages are increasing faster than people thought, and we need to be able to keep up with that because our peers are doing that.
Yeah, and there's nowhere else to go. I mean, you need a teacher. It's not like you can call it.
Right. But teachers have a lot of options because there's been a lot of turnover, a lot of earlier people retiring earlier, the great retirement, a great resignation, where people through COVID were just like, I couldn't do it. My hats are off to all the teachers. It is a really tough job through COVID. You're seeing significant increases in the needs of children, mental health needs, underdevelopment, just more, and it's being put on your average teachers.
Yeah.
And so when we came to the table, we had two things that we really wanted. We wanted to find ways of increasing the rigor of instruction and basically increase time on learning, but we recognized we wanted to pay for that. We needed to pay for that, sure. And so that was part of our thinking when we came to come up with that 4.33.
Okay. So when this all breaks down, how much does it cost a taxpayer who owns a home?
So the average home is assessed at $648,000.
That in and of itself, let's just all pause and think about what that is.
Right.
The average home,
right.
$600,000+ is astonishing.
And so this will be $201 for the average home. Now, the average home doesn't exist a lot. So if people are at home and they want to do the math, the assessors there's some information in our FAQ on the Holliston Schools website, but it's about 31 cents on $1,000 is what the increase is. But I also think there's been a lot of conversation online about everyone's homes are going up in value. I mean, so even if Holliston Schools are falling back a little bit, what do we care? Well, this is real dollars and cents for people. So I went back and I looked, and this is not the easiest way to compare because it's a little delayed, but I looked at Hopkinton and Holliston's average assessed values. And since 2010, Holliston's average assessed value has gone up by 65%. It's great. It's a huge increase. Hopkinton's has gone up 75%. So if you've owned your home since 2010 or longer, just take what you think your home is valued, and you're missing, if you will, if you lived in Hopkinton, 10%. Yeah. Well, if your average home is worth $650,000, that's $65,000 of lost value. And people are constantly comparing Holliston's rankings to Hopkinton's, and people are saying, well, people are leaving to go to Hopkinton. Hopkinton has its own issues, but
it does.
But it's impossible to sort of look at somebody and say schools don't matter to home prices, while also then saying, but our rankings are falling and Hopkinton's are doing better.
Yeah. Well, I think what I would find refreshing is if someone just said, I just don't want to pay any more money. That is about as honest as you can get, but we end up with these circuitous arguments that are not necessarily.
But on that point, I think it's important, and this is more your bailiwick, and you can correct me if I make any misstatements, but the town is also doing something about that, especially for seniors. Yeah. In 2022 town meeting, passed a special legislation request out of the state to take what is known as a senior circuit breaker, which is if you make, as a married couple, up to $105,000 or so now a year, you can get a certain amount off of your state income taxes. I think it's up to $2,300. And so what Holliston, and you were on the assessors at the time, did was we said, let's take that calculation, because it's easy, it's already being done for us, and let's apply it, and we'll give those people between 50 and 200% off of their property taxes, in addition to what they're seeing in their income taxes. That was passed into law and signed by the governor in May. So in the following year, people who are over 65, whose homes are worth less than $1 million, and who make up to $105,000 for a married couple, can see substantial reductions in their property, far more than what we're asking for here. You know, I mean, it's all going to be decided obviously by the select board in between 50 and 200%, but it could be, you know, a couple, 1,000, 2,000 or more dollars. You know, so I really hope that there are no people at home who feel like they're on a fixed income, they can't afford this, they don't want to choose between medicine and food and being able to pay their property taxes. They don't want to leave town, because we certainly don't want you know, to push our seniors out of their homes. But you know, relief is here, and you know.
There are other programs too that I won't take up time doing here, but there are other programs available to people who are in that situation, and it's unfortunate. It's true in every community, but at any rate. So one of the things that's been, I think, particularly painful is the suggestion that somehow everybody was in some sort of conspiracy, and this was all manipulated to happen after we got through town meeting. Now, I believe that all of this distrust and all of this kind of conspiracy stuff is just a trickle-down thing. I think everybody has forgotten that the people who are sitting on working on our committees and stuff are volunteers. They got nothing to gain except a whole lot of pain and aggravation, you know?
Right.
So exactly what's the benefit from manipulating the process? I don't mean to make fun of it, but it's just, you know, I'm not sure that anybody could manage to do that. You can't keep a secret, you know? Somebody run away with somebody else's husband, you can't keep that secret. You can be sure this isn't going to be kept a secret either. But what's your answer? How do you get through that? Were you in cahoots?
I think you asked the question that I think everybody at home who has any thought that there was some sort of ulterior motives or something else going on underneath here, some sort of nefarious, you know, acts. What benefit has anybody gained from this and going through this process, which is far more painful than going through the normal May town meeting, May election process? Just ask yourself that problem. If you say, well, maybe you're trying to get it done and slip it through the voters well, we've had 1,400 people already vote by mail early because we knew going into it that we were going to pair this up with a larger election. 1,400 in the May town election, which was already a huge outturn election. Only 800 people total voted early. So maybe we'll be at 2,000 early votes already just for this. I mean, if anything, we have increased the sort of voter participation here. So we're certainly not getting anything, you know,
it all gets back
under the shadows of the night.
There's nothing that you can gain benefit personally from it either. You're not going to gain anything, you know, I mean. And
it makes their job harder.
And neither are the teachers, really. They're going to get a salary increase. Let's all be honest. Every contract has a COLA in it. You know, that's just the way public service is done. And so we're only talking about the difference between whatever and whatever, and what is the subterfuge in that? Let's just be honest, these COLAs are here all the time. It's not, they happen in the general government too, if that's coming as news, you know, happens on both sides. So what are you saying? What are you trying to explain to people? Maybe it's about the process. Maybe they have no clue how this all works.
I know that both parties were responsible in coming to the table early on in November, which is earlier than we have typically in the past started traditional bargaining. Sometimes that usually doesn't start until January, February, March. And the parties had dates that we made and kept, and they were regular and frequent. And for the people who have never been part of negotiations, it is a very delicate process. And what you see here is the three of us sitting here today. And I think that speaks measures to how this negotiations turned out, that we can all still be working together for the improvement of our schools, that we can sit here together, we can move our district forward after having this contract negotiations. Now, the tricky part is the day we came to an agreement, we didn't know we were going to come to an agreement.
How does that happen?
Well, when everyone comes in with their issues, their concessions that they're willing to make, and the things that they know their constituents need. And we even at one point needed to really pull our teachers to find out where they stood on certain issues. We needed to know where they were at, because this contract is something that needs to be ratified. And it's a very delicate process where, not even meeting by meeting, but literally minute by minute, hour by hour in this process. You're just constantly massaging the whole thing. You're trying to work one angle, work another angle, and try to see where you can land. It's not just here's what we want, here's what you want, let's just split the baby in the middle. It doesn't work that way.
I don't know how we came to an agreement. I'll just be honest. I mean, you know, the school committee negotiating team, which I was a member of, we had. I mean, and Jamie can concur or disagree with me, but we had 2 pretty tough April meetings, and I think that the school committee took a hard look. We were coming towards the end of the year. Going into summer was always going to be tough, and then the contract was going to expire. So we took a hard look at what we were asking for, what we were willing to give, and we came back, and this was a meeting that had been on the books for weeks, if not months. I don't remember how long, but it just so happened to be 2 days after town meeting. And we made what we thought were reasonable concessions that might get us starting working towards a final deal within a couple of meetings from there. And just through that negotiating process, it became clear that there was a deal to be had in a quicker order. And I think sometimes things just kind of align that way and you have a breakthrough.
Isn't that a good thing?
It is a
we
great
should
thing.
be celebrating that.
I honestly, one of the things that's been most frustrating to me is that when we came to this deal, a deal that I believe with all my heart is an incredible deal for everybody, and I was so excited that we were able to do this, and then to just have it fall flat in the community,
blow up in your face.
Yeah, it's been really tough, because it's this is something that I think will benefit everybody so much, and you can pick apart any details of anything. Every contract, I'm sure if people really paid attention to them, could pick it apart. This one just so happened to be that we needed an override to fund it because of the town. I mean, for numerous reasons. I mean,
we were short on money this year.
The town was short on money this year.
We were very short on money.
And the schools didn't want to put the town in a position where we sort of forced their hand to sacrifice in other areas.
Yeah.
So.
And I will go so far as to say that does happen sometimes, where it is you're sitting there and you are choosing one child over the other, general government over the other. And I think the fact that everybody, and by everybody I will say across town government, has been much more careful about not doing that in the last 5 or so, 10 years, I don't know how many years, much more, maybe it's since Travis got here, but much more conscious of the fact that, yeah, we're happy to support you, but that means we got to take it from whatever other department it is, Let me ask you, who's on the negotiating team? What are the positions that are on a negotiating team? You are?
Yeah, so from the union perspective, we assemble a team, and this year we have 5 teachers who are part of the negotiations team, and our AFT field rep from our state organization is also with us on our team.
Among the teachers, are any of them newer teachers so that they get a particular voice in it, or is it experienced teachers?
That's a great question. Our role is to advocate for all of our teachers. So we are looking at it from a variety of different angles, trying to decide which proposals we think are most useful to put forward, what we're willing to sort of give up in exchange for those proposals. So when we come to the table, we're representing all of our teachers and all of their voices, and it looks different each time we come to a contract negotiations depending upon the needs of our staff. And this year we listened to our staff and came forward with what the proposals we thought were most important to them.
I do remember in researching the article that I wrote for Holliston Reporter, that there were a couple of times in the last 10 or 15 years in which the teachers did not keep pace with what the understanding was, what the expectation was in terms of salaries. So I looked at this and it was kind of like, there's a little bit of makeup here. There's a little bit catching up. And whether that's right or legal or whatever, if it had happened to me and I had, expected something to go one way, yes, I'll take a freeze on my salary this year, but I would expect that at some point I will be compensated for that, and it never happened, I gotta tell you, I wouldn't be a happy camper. So who represents the administration?
So the contract is really the negotiation between the school committee and the teachers, and our administrators act as advisees in that role.
And
so
that's it.
I sat with my two assistant superintendents, Dr. Menard and Mr. Boudet, were also sitting in the room with me, and school committee and HFT.
So you don't have to participate in the sense of taking one or the other side. You're basically trying to facilitate and help people.
I don't have to participate, but I'm on the side of school committee, if you will, because I work for the school committee. But
Okay.
it's more, I do answer questions more and
It is
advise.
also funny. The whole thing is also
We had hours of strategy sessions and discussions about what we thought in the contract we could try to help if there are issues in the schools that the administration was seeing. What could we ask that was reasonable? But by and large, you're right, it's a contract between the school committee and the teachers union, but we rely on the administrators for everything. I mean, anything that we thought about doing or proposing or wanting,
Would this
we said,
work?
can we do this? Because we don't know if it can be implemented, and they think about it, and it would be.
okay. I got it.
Yeah.
So you're filling in the blanks because you'd have blanks. You would.
There
you
are
would know.
experts. We have a sort of path that we're trying to take, an overarching path that we're trying to take, but we do it in conjunction with the administrative team.
And then questions do come up at the table, and HFT might ask a question, and I usually am the one to be able to answer that because I understand the needs of the school district and how the contract affects things.
Okay. So and from the school committee, how many people are from the school?
It was three of us, so you always want to not have a
Not a quorum.
not have a quorum or really a majority. And so it was myself, Don Naborski, and Amanda Bigelow.
Okay.
And then, of course, the school attorney.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, our attorney.
And I would just point out, I'm hoping most people realize this, you're a pretty young committee. And by that, I'm not referring to your ages as much as I am to your experience as a school committee. You've been on for a year and a half.
My second year, yep.
Yeah. And you've got three people who've been on for just a few minutes.
We have two people who've been on, myself and Sarah, who've been on for that long, and then we have three new members, and then we have two members who have more experience. And yeah, so as far as the experience of the committee, pretty
Tough
minimal.
year.
Though I will add, I did do 11 years on the finance committee, so I have some
But
knowledge of.
You have some understanding, and someday you and I are going to do coffee over this because I just think life on the other sides of the streets are all so different,
Coffee with something, right?
No.
No.
Okay, so anyway, superintendent, could I ask you a question about start times and instructional times? How do you now go ahead and try to make this happen? Let's assume, good news, this all passes, we're moving forward, okay? Now what?
That's why it's in year 2, because there was initially that was our ask, is that the school committee wanted to try to have that in year 1, and if we had been able to do it earlier in the year, then possibly we could have done it for this year. We couldn't possibly make that change happen. We do need time to look at all the schedules and look at the bus changes and all of that, so we will have hopefully almost a full year to make those adjustments. I'm not worried. I know we're going to come up with solutions to that, and I think at the end, the 15 minutes that the kids will gain in grades 3 through 12, and then also 10 minutes in pre-K to 2, I just think that's phenomenal for kids. We needed longer time to get the standards taught, to be equitable for our students. I think, rankings is one thing you look at. How are our kids achieving overall is more important than the rankings. Our rankings are starting to go up, but I think more importantly, what education are our kids getting? We're aligning all of our work with our strategic plan. We'll continue to do so. That extra time will be critical to help us move forward in a positive way.
How do you do it, though? How do you get this many? I mean, it feels to me like you've got, you're trying to organize an entire community to come together, especially when it comes to the start times. You must have subcommittees, and you get think tank people types or whatever to come together.
Well, I think the easy solution is if we can get the 2 start times instead of 3 start times, because right now we combine our middle school and high school students on buses, and they're only 5 minutes apart from the start at middle school to high school. It's the Placentino Miller times that have been challenging in getting them all on one campus. So we probably would have to do a different bus run where we might do high school and Placentino, but then they wouldn't be on the same buses, which is what people assume. There's no way you can put pre-K to 2-year-old, grade 2 year students and high school students in the same bus, since it's not legal to do so, and
Yeah,
it's
I
not,
was gonna say, you've got
it's certainly
real
not
issues
helpful.
there.
But I
Yeah.
think, so this is something that, people have been asking questions, what exactly, where's the
What's
15
it
minutes
gonna
going to go?
do?
How are you going to do?
Yeah, we don't know.
The school
You can't
committee's
know.
role is to negotiate a contract, working with the administration. Our job is not to implement the contract. I think that's
Right.
where
That's what I'm trying to get
If you
across.
think of the contract as policy and as an agreement between us and the teachers, we then take the final contract and we turn it over to the administration and the teachers, and we say,
Go for it.
this is yours now, you figure it out. Which is why it's so important to make sure that the administrators know what we're negotiating and say, yeah, we should be able to do this. But that's going to be a process that we're going to go through until January on a number of issues, and then continue on other things. And that's for the administrators to make the decisions. Some of these will end up being decisions or proposals that then get presented to the school committee. And I would imagine for start times, we're going to get a proposal from the administrators, and they will have either discussed it previously with the teachers in the union, or we'll then take that proposal and then we'll seek feedback from not just the teachers in the union, but also the community. This is going to be a collaborative process where everybody's involved, everyone has a say. That doesn't necessarily mean that just because you have a say that that's what's going to happen. So, but we heard, and we'll go forward. But it would have been impossible in any contract, whether we needed an override or not, to have all of the details ironed out for something this complex now. And when people say, "Well, you haven't told me what those minutes are going to be used for, so therefore I'm out," I
can tell you what they're not going to be used for. I know some people have said to me,
they're not
going to be for lunch, they're not going to be for recess, because we have set times for those. And I know I've had some families say, well, my kids need more recess time. And to be honest with you, we have a good amount of time here. Our students get 30 minutes for lunch and 25 minutes for recess. When I taught elementary school, it was 45 minutes for recess and lunch combined. So our kids already get a good amount of time, which is important to their social emotional learning. I don't want to take that away. But there's no need to increase it. It's going to direct instruction.
When you said earlier that you work for the school committee, in fact, it is your responsibility now to be evaluating what the superintendent does and how this all gets implemented. That's the beginning, and you're not going to be in there doing the nitty-gritty details. And I think that's important for people to understand. Everybody has a job. It's not everybody has the same job. And those of us in the public really don't have as many rights to information that doesn't exist as we might think. I mean, there's just no way to know the answers to these questions until the time comes.
But there is oversight, though.
There is oversight.
Where's there over? I mean, the oversight is the town administrator, the select board, the finance committee.
Regular meetings, even.
Our meetings, town meeting, where we have auditors that audit our financial books for those who are really into conspiracy theories. I mean, it's not like we just go off and take the money and it's this black box and do whatever we want with it.
And we've had a lot of presentations around things like rankings, around the rigor of our programs, around new programs that we're doing with students, around curricular resources. Not a lot of people attend those meetings, so
And
I'd
that
like
is
to see more
another
people
thing.
attend.
You had how many meetings
We've had 8 so far.
We've had 8, and you've had anywhere from 0 to 2 people.
With more of the 0 to 1, and usually the 1 is just someone who happens to be getting coffee.
I think because some of the questions that we're still hearing about today have been answered and discussed at length at multiple meetings.
Over again, right? Jaime, the impacts to the teachers as far as the instructional time, how does that affect your life, other than the fact you have 15 more minutes to worry about?
Just looking back a few years, I think what the pandemic taught us is we have amazing teachers who can pivot and change and adapt in an instant. At the beginning of that school year, we were granted 2 weeks. 2 weeks. To be able to shift and figure out, and with the plan from our administrators, we were able to keep our elementary kids in school every day. That didn't happen in most schools. And even our middle school and high schoolers had the option to be in school every day. And so what that tells me is we have great teachers who are able to adapt and change. And what they want is they want to be able to have a voice. They want to be able to share, hey, this is where we see our students' needs are. And so working with Dr. Kustka, we hope that in this process on utilizing this instructional time, once the administration has done their part with saying, okay, it's an enormous puzzle to solve. Because these aren't 2 separate issues, instructional time and busing.
No, it's all tied together.
It's all together. And there's so many constraints and parameters that are on that the administration team's really going to have to dedicate an enormous amount of time this year. while doing their full-time jobs, to be able to come up with some plausible ideas. And then, you know, incorporating the teacher feedback in terms of, hey, here's how we see this. These are the needs that we see. And using those leadership channels through the building administrators is really what teachers are looking for at that instructional time. And they're going to be able to adapt and change. And the timeline that we came up with is really important. That timeline is going to, one, notify families of our teachers as well as families in town of when those start times are going to change. What we saw last time that happened with the school start times, the change was made late. People had daycare already booked for their infant children, and then they found out they had to be at work an hour earlier. And it just didn't work for many families. And we actually did lose one teacher I can think of who had to resign because of that. And so we want to make sure we're communicating to the community, to all of our teachers well in advance of what those start times are going to look like. So when they're making their reservations for childcare in January, because it's hard to find childcare now, they're able to do that and know what their workday is going to look like. And then the next step is really ironing out all of those details and figuring out what those school schedules look like for each grade and what those needs are. But the buses and the instructional time, that is all just linked together. And we might have an ideal situation of what we want for our students, but we're also going to have to be really making this puzzle fit and work. Wouldn't you say so, Dr. Kustka? I mean, you've probably been thinking about it a lot this summer of what this might look like.
Yes, and we don't make decisions in isolation. You know, to Jamie's point, the administration will make recommendations. We'll talk with the school committee, we'll talk with HFT, and ultimately what works best for our children and what works best to get our staff here with our children is what we're going to come up with in the end.
Yeah, it will be complex.
What people may not realize is Dr. Kustka and I, along with our vice president and the central office administration team, we meet regularly and we talk about the issues that are coming up. And so that's not something people would know happens. And you know, this is another avenue of having that open dialogue and open conversation to keep tabs on this as the process unfolds and keeping that moving in the right direction.
Okay. And from the school committee's perspective, we've already established you don't get into the weeds, and you've already said you will have committees that are.
We certainly try not to.
Yeah, but that you're obviously paying attention.
But we need to know what's going on so that when we have questions asked by parents, you know, that we have an answer. And you know, so, but no, I mean, generally speaking, we rely heavily on the administrators, the teachers, and you know, to be the professionals that they are.
So one question that I'm not sure has gotten exercised quite enough from my perspective anyway, and that is, if in fact this doesn't work, and everybody wants you to tell them today, you know, who's going to not have a job or what program are you going to cut, and I know you cannot do that, all right? And I have no expectation you'll be able to do that the day that this decision is made at the polls. What I want to know about is, what's the process? I want the public to understand that you're not just sitting there, well, you know what? How about we do this? You know, I know you're a thoughtful, all of you are thoughtful people. So what is it? What does it take to then come around with that decision?
I'm very worried about that happening because our teachers are waiting to find out what their salaries are. I hired a bunch of new teachers over the summer and I had to quote them the current salaries, and I said, I hope this will be your salary next year. I really can't promise you anything. We're back to the drawing board. The school committee and HFT have to start negotiations all over again. This is my 5th year in the district, and I've spent 3 out of the first 4 years negotiating contracts with school committee and HFT because we were 2 years in mediation that I walked into. We spent the bulk of last year, so that's not really a fun job for superintendent. It's making it hard to build a good culture and climate together, and we want to forge ahead. So we put that tension back in. It's starting all over. I don't know what the end result could be. It could come to the fact that we would need layoffs. I can't be laying off in the middle of the year when programs are already established, so it'd be quite challenging.
Is there the possibility that ultimately the only answer is money again?
Yes. There is a very real possibility that if this fails, and only if this fails, that the school committee will be back in May asking for another override. Yeah. But this one will probably look very different, and probably will come with a significant cut list if it fails. And I don't know how you get between there. All I know is that if you think about what was going on in the schools in 2020 and 2021 with the morale, acrimony about the contract and the situation.
It was terrible.
It was terrible. And so, and if this is voted down, Jaime could speak better than I can on this, but I mean, teacher morale will plummet. It will be a significant period of uncertainty as we try to come up with an agreement. But unlike other districts, because this is continuous, there will be no layoffs day one.
Right.
But it will just be this period of time of uncertainty and I'm sure fear for a lot of people who work for the district.
And we do have such amazing teachers in this district that we do want to retain and keep here. My daughter's a teacher. I was a teacher for 15 years before I became an administrator. My niece just started at Stonehill College to become a teacher. So, I mean, very, very much invested in education. And I want to make sure that Holliston sends out messages to our teachers as well.
And Dan and Dr. Kustka, what led us to this place? I mean, are we really seeing an increase in costs to our overall budget? And that's the timing of the contract negotiations sort of just put itself into, you could only recommend for the budget that we knew about in May. You had to put forth a warrant, what, in maybe March or April for that information? Okay, right. So you had to know, in advance what your budget was, and we didn't have a contract settled at that point. But the overall costs of the district have increased.
Cost of everything.
The cost of everything have
Busing,
increased.
maintenance,
Right.
Sure.
fuel, I mean, just.
Well, everybody at home knows that.
Yeah.
And that's really the message. Bottom line message is everything costs more. Okay. So.
And Proposition 2.5 just does not work when you have inflation.
No, it does not. And anyway, that's why they did put in it the feature of overrides, because they recognized that sometimes it would not work. Anyway, folks, we need to wrap this up because we have been at this for 50 minutes.
Okay.
See, when you're having such a good time. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope that we've aired a bunch of stuff. I hope we can get this out to the community so that people can at least hear the real voices of folks. We didn't get time to talk about what it feels like to be a teacher who's sitting there wondering and wondering and worrying, and I'm sorry that we didn't, but I'm sure that's real. I mean, for anybody who is sitting there wondering about their job, their career, whatever, that's real. So, at any rate, with that, I will thank you again, and don't forget the special election is on September 10th, high school as usual, and it's for the override. Thanks so much. Catch you next time.